they're all warnings, right? That
Yes.
like I remember in that video I watched it, and you said, well, did they really exist? And it's like, well, hang on, don't they exist? Because right? That's our materialist mindset. That's our materialist mindset. Back in the day, when you go back, their ontology, their worldview was different to us. They weren't materialist. They didn't see that way, but they literally saw, maybe not back, it depends how far that legend goes back. I think it probably goes far back a long way. They literally saw it, though. Even if it wasn't materially there, as you say, they saw it. Like, they didn't just tell a BS story about it. It was like in their, like, so in their worldview that they would see. Like, there's records of this stuff. Like, there's records of it even today in like extreme moments. Like, there's like two people see the same thing. Like, there's these two rock climbers that they almost died, and they both saw the same thing, the same like mythological thing appear. In like, this is in 1920 or something. Jung talks about this. You might call that an apparition. Like gods, for instance, like Zeus. They saw them in the forest when they would go out there, and not just as a delusion. Like, not every time, of course. Sorry, go.
Slightly modern one. Those two people that I know, one of them I'm quite close with, and we were talking about things like this, myths and legends, blah, blah, blah. And he told me a story about when he was 5 years old. He was out in the back garden with his sister, and it was sort of dusk, like sun's not quite set yet. It's still semi-light, but it's a little bit dark. And they looked up and they saw a black figure with glowing red eyes sitting on the roof. But they said it was a man, but it was crawling on all fours, and it started shrieking at us in like some language. But then when we were shouting things back at it, like in fear, like shouting, go away and stuff like that at it, the thing started speaking in English to them, and it was saying horrific, like vulgar, like horrible shit. But he turned around and says, when he said it, it didn't sound like just some old man saying horrible shit. Like, it sounded archaic the way the way this thing was wording it. And we spoke about the story, and I was just sitting there going, oh, fucking hell, that's quite scary, a scary thing for a child to go through. He decided to go home that night and call his sister. Like, this, the guy's in his 50s now, and he called his sister and went, do you remember when we were in the back garden playing like years ago, when I was like 6 and you were like 8, and that thing was on the roof? And his sister went apeshit and went, I thought I made that up. I didn't think that was a real memory. You remember that as well? And he went, yeah, I remember it. I thought I made it up. But both of them remembered it, and they were both like vouching each other's parts of the story. And that, I don't know, I found that really weird. Look, that freaked me out a little.
People need to understand, though, that, look, like, we've got this mindset, we know everything because of science. We know, this atheism. I'm not an atheist personally, but possession, right? And in an objective language, possession's real. When you're possessed by the devil, that's a literal meme complex. And like, if you want to talk in objective language, that's an archetype that has possessed them, and they're no longer sort of conscious. It's taken over consciousness, right? They're not just going, oh, no, they're possessed by, if you want to, like the meme complex. Because like I mentioned before, like, what we are as characters is procedures and an outcome. Like, stories are alive. Like, they change, exist. They're sort of like, they exist in a sort of hyperspace between all of us, in the sense of they're in each of our brains, right? But that region is real. Like, they're real arrangements of real matter in your brain. They just happen to be across many brains, right? But that's what a god is. And again, like I said, possession is real in that sense. Like, they're not making.
So would you say that? So would you say that something happened to them to cause a massive enough shift in their personality to push them into negative traits? So negative traits, like, I'm not saying lying on the ground, writhing, speaking in tongues, trying to summon Beelzebub himself. I don't mean like literal shit like that. I mean, like, do you feel that something happened to them in the process, turned them into a worse off person that then does bad things?
I think that our psyche, and this is like, this is psychology, think about Jung, whatever, is that you're not just your immanence, your consciousness. There are things below the surface that are operating that you're just unconscious of, right? Yeah. Think about your sex drive. You can't control that, can you? So you go, I'm not going to jerk off tomorrow, for instance. I'm not going to do this. And then you end up doing it, don't you? Or I'm going to be on a diet. So how much control do you really have? There are archetypes below the surface, which will, if you don't integrate them, right? Like, say, having a partner, having a relationship, that's integrating your anima, which is like the female part of your personality. How early was it that you knew you were sort of good at telling story? Like, the Scottish word for it's patter. isn't it? Right? You go to a pub. It's like, oh, you got good powder brew, right? That's really what it is. It's a cultural thing. Like, when did you know you were sort of good at that, like telling stories and telling jokes?
From an early age, it was a case of if I heard some mental story that I just thought that's fucking brilliant, I wanted to tell as many people about it as possible. Like, and also like the real true stories like are much better, because when you realize that these insane events actually happened, they hit so much harder. And I've always enjoyed talking about it. But even when I was doing my YouTube channel and I was doing, the left are coming to cut your kids' dicks off and possibly molest them, like type of videos and stuff like that, I never really thought about doing that. It wasn't until I went, okay, I'm going to make a little bit of a fun video, and I discovered a gentleman called Rainer Winkler, who is a Dragon Lord, who I just thought, right, this story is fucking mental. This is fucking insane. There's so much footage. I need to do a video on this just for a bit of fun. I did the video on it, and people were all saying, this was brilliant. We thoroughly enjoyed this. You should do more content like this. And I thought, okay, then I'll do a series on it. And basically the name Absolute Mad Lads appeared, and that's when I just started. And instead of at first, it was just sort of mental,
like young people, like you got people that admire you now, which I know when you probably don't see yourself that way, but like when you're younger though, I want to know, like when you're what did you want to do when you were a kid? Like, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do?
I wanted to be an archaeologist.
Really? Dude, so dying.
Yeah. Do you want to know what shattered my dreams? My dad was like quite high up in the fire brigade, and he actually, through some connections, knew some people at Glasgow University who have a very, very well renowned like archaeology department. They go out and find Roman ruins and all these Roman artifacts and everything, sometimes some Viking stuff and everything, old stuff from Norman conquest, Anglo-Saxon stuff. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. I can't believe I'm actually. And they went, yeah, you're going to do your school work experience in their archaeology department. And I was, oh my God, that's amazing. I was in a little room in the back of the department, hovering over a sink, scrubbing little bits of pot with a toothbrush. That was me for the entire week. And I was like, this was shit. This fucking sucked. Man,
oh, you hated it. You hated it.
I hated it. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, when I go into this, I'm not going to be Indiana Jones getting lowered down into some old Roman catacombs or something like that, right? And I knew that wasn't going to happen, but I was like, can I at least like go to a field? Can I put a trowel into the ground? Also, I got none of that. Like, I got a little bit of a tour of the artifact room, which was interesting as shit. But that lasted about 20 minutes until one of the top guys came in and went, they're not allowed to be in here.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool.
You're a shit kicker now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they had things like Viking axe heads and everything. And I was like, right, okay, this is the cool, this is the good shit. This is fun. But then no, get back to scrubbing bits of pot with a toothbrush. Yeah. So that kind of like shattered the dream.
Yeah, it's like the story of it. You fell in love with the story of the archaeology, right? That was me, because I thought Indiana Jones, right? I have this old clip of me, like a video of me, like my parents shot, and they oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'm like, yeah, I want to be an archaeologist, like Indiana Jones. That's probably where you got it from, dude. Like maybe because you said your dad sort of worked in it though, or was involved in it.
Oh no, my dad was very high up in the fire brigade, and he was connected to the people that ran Glasgow University. So he spoke to a friend of a friend who put him in touch and everything. And do you know, for me, it wasn't even Indiana Jones. It was something like far, far more embarrassing. Yeah, right. Do you remember Time Team?
Time Team, yes, I love Time Team, man.
Yes,
yeah, I watched every episode of that shit.
I used to watch shit tons of that when I was like a little child, and I was like, "That's so cool, that's amazing, I want to do that." And so no, didn't get to go out and dig up any Roman forts or anything like that, unfortunately. But
is there anything to do with the stuff that are around you? Because I'm also wanting to talk to you today about mythology, right? Because you're just getting into that with your videos. Yeah. Like, did you grow up in a village? Did you grow up in a...
No, I grew up in a very working class. You know, like the towns that used to be very big on like mining and steelworks and stuff, and then all of that shut down, and then the place just becomes this like absolute, like almost like a LARP of the TV show Shameless.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah, essentially, I grew up in Coatbridge. That's where I grew up and everything. And the key things I learned there was how to roll a free skinner joint. That was yeah. So it wasn't great. It's not a great place to be. I grew up in one of the worst parts as well, a place called Summerlee. And Summerlee sounds lovely, but it's not.
It ain't summer in Summerlee.
Yeah, no,
it's cold, dinge winter, grimdark.
Yeah, the local priest get robbed at knife point by two 13-year-olds. That's the type of place it is. But that's where I grew up. But I have always enjoyed like the country life and everything like that. I understand that sometimes I would like going into cities for the convenience, where it's like I need to visit a bunch of shops, I'll go into the city. But as for living in a city, I just think the idea is atrocious. I don't know how people can live in them. But right now, I live in a little village where fucking nothing happens. Nothing happens here, and it's blissful. I fucking love it here.
Yeah, so country life is kind of idealized for you, which makes sense from where you came from. In the village you're in now, what's the community center? Is it the pub? Is that where the sort of general community meet? Like, what's the outlay? Because part of my work is that. It's like understanding what the base thing is of our cultures, right? Which is the pub is a really important community center.
It is, you're correct.
Yeah.
We've got two pubs. One pub is for people of a certain Roman religious faith, and the other pub is for people with a more royalist religious faith. because
the old troubles still continue.
Oh, yes, they do. Yes, they do. However, the Catholic pub, is the center of the village. That's what I would say is the main one, and then the much smaller Protestant community go to the other one just outside of town,
So that's outside of town as well. Yeah. That's interesting, right? Because like in England, of course, like it's the Irish pub. It's the one that's where the rough people are, right? Whereas, is that what you mean by Catholic? It's like not Irish, but is that just a Scottish Catholic pub? Is that what you mean?
It's basically the pub where the Catholics and Celtic supporters go. It's a literal one. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That is because the thing about the English pub, I think there's a difference between the English pub and the Scottish pub. Is that the English pub is, I would say the Scottish pubs are rougher, right? Like it's more you're tested when you're in there. Or is it? In that pub in your village, is there like the sort of community stuff on the wall? Do they have the local, or is it more like a sports pub?
They have. Not outside. They used to have this outside, but then they got in a little bit of trouble, so now they're inside. Pictures of various martyrs, shall we say? Basically the ones outside, they used to have like the Celtic. They've got the Celtic players now, but it used to be people that died fighting against the crown for a united Ireland.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Yeah,
That's interesting.
It was hardcore. There's a very hardcore pub.
It's kind of interesting how like the exchange of saints to the modern saints who are kind of like the famous players, right? It is kind of like that. That's the working, but it's the modern man's mythology, really. When you think about it, it's like that's the Zeus of modern day. These sort of celebrities. Whereas the saints of old times were... Although the funny thing is, these players don't have any morals, right? Or the saints, at least, are a good example of what you should do. But,
it's like they're talking about someone who was a pious man, or someone who gave his sandals to the poor beggar, or washed the leper's feet, or something like that. And then it's like, there's fucking Shoko Nakamura. Fucking like, you know what I mean? Like footballs. Yeah. I mean, if you want them to be your athletic idols, where it's like, oh, I wish I was as healthy as that and everything, I wish I was able to run that fast, then cool, that's fine. However, for your moral standards, I don't think a footballer is the best choice. Yeah,
totally. And the thing is, that's how we, like, when we come up as young humans, that's how, when we imitate that which we admire. So it's actually really important. And athletically, that's fine, but it's... that's what we've kind of lost touch with, I think, our connection with our greatest heroes. And a hero is someone who does something, who is like a great adaptation that was crucial to your culture, who represents the value hierarchy, like William Wallace, Robert the Bruce. These people are admired, right? And then you want to You even do it subconsciously, unconsciously. You imitate that hero's procedures, like a story. Essentially, even all the stories you tell is a procedure and its outcome. It's the different actions and the outcome, right? That's all we are, really. Like we're a set of actions and the outcomes of that. Like, that's what a goal is. You set a goal, you follow through those actions. That's why it's so important. And,
it goes along with some people like sort of fall into the trap to think that they are supposed to make the hero's journey at some point in their life, and it's not. Well, that's not going to happen to everyone. You're not going to be in a situation where you will have to follow the hero's journey. But I think the entire point of it is you need to be prepared to be. You need to be that type of person, right? So basically, when shit goes down, you want to have the skills and the moral fortitude to be able to do all of that. Like, you look at the hero's journey and you need to say to yourself, what would I do in that situation? And then it's a case of, well, you want to aspire to do what the hero did in that situation. Your friends were in danger. You put your own life in danger to save them and help them, right? And it's a case of, you may not be in that situation. I kind of hope that you're never in a situation like that, but it's a case of you're supposed to aspire to be that if you are ever in that type of situation.
And it's interesting, right? It's not even, people think, oh, I have to just, how do I become the man? How do I gain the virtues of the person that's able to do that? And that's when it comes to virtue ethics, which is, if you want to be courageous, right? You need to you break it down as in, what are the small things I can do every week that makes me more courageous? Like, you gain it from habituating this. Like, that might be, okay, just standing up to someone who just talks down to me or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you do that, and the more you habituate that, so you practice the small things for when the big thing comes along, and you need to be courageous, you will be, because you've habituated the virtue of courage. So it's like an enabling constraint. So you constrain yourselves with these practices that you habituate, and then when the moment comes, you can do it. That's so it's not just like you can train for this sort of stuff.
Yeah, but then also putting it into practice and stuff like that as well. And it could be, as standing up to your boss who treats you like shit. It could be like, that might be your little equivalent of fighting the dragon. That's a case of...
That's true, though. But
it's not quite as major, but it is a little victory that made a positive.
And you can use the hero stories as symbols, right? Which you're going to get into with the Celtic mythology. This isn't just stuff to go, oh, that's interesting. It's stuff to look at. Okay, how does that relate to me? They're symbols that we can look at and break down, because the modern struggle doesn't look like the struggle back in the day when you had swords, but it can be just as, like the Green Knight. There's the Green Knight, Arthur and Gawain and the Green Knight is like that, right? Is that it compares the story between a quest of fighting stuff and being tempted by a woman. So
it's the Green Knight story. I know the gist of the Green Knight story. Is the Green Knight the guy that challenged Arthur, if you can cut my head off? Was that him? I know the gist. I don't know the exact story, but I thought that was pretty badass, though, when he just puts his head back on his shoulders and goes, I'll see you in a year. That was pretty fucking badass.
Totem shad. Yeah. It's basically like, it's about Gawain, who's like basically Arthur's avatar. It's like a young knight and Green Knight. So Green Knight challenges Arthur. That young knight takes on the quest to, you got to find me in a year to chop off my head, then I can chop off your head, because he does it and he puts his head back on, like you say. But the point of that story, though, is that it's basically, it's not an allegory, but it's a symbol to show you that, because the true struggle he really faces is this temptation of the woman, right? Because he goes to face the Green Knight and goes into the other world, essentially, and finds a keep there. I'll just quickly outlay this. Finds a keep there on the way to trying to get to this Green Knight to meet the quest and let the Green Knight chop at his head like he did. And then he finds there a keep inside this other world, this dark place. So he's not expecting, because of course you go on the quest, right, expecting to fight dragons. He goes there, finds this keep, and this lord is friendly to him, and his wife's there, right? And the lord goes hunting and leaves Gawain there, and they basically feast him. They give him all this stuff, right? All this food and everything he could possibly want, right? And he's constantly like, facing this. And the wife of the person's flirting with him, right? Trying to get him to have sex with her, right? And so that's his challenge. And it compares that to the Lord hunting. And so what that relates to is, in common life now, is it's like these tales are relevant because what are we? We're feasted with everything we could possibly want, aren't we? Like we could have the internet. We've got like like constantly giving us dopamine for stuff. That is just as hard in a way as the quest against, like the Green Knight shows, as the quest against the dragon, the quest against to face the woman's temptation in the Green Knight. So the tales are relevant to it. Like your struggle's the same if you use it as a symbol. These heroic tales, you can go, oh yeah, that's the dragon, that's this. So it could be your boss. Like your boss is the dragon, right? Okay, because the archetypal patterns sort of match up. Anyway, does that make sense?
It does not. I understand what you mean, and I do. We live in a time of massive overabundance of everything. It can be entertainment all the way down to like processed fucking freeze-dried junk food. It's fucking everywhere, and it's a case of obviously the more and more temptation there is, the even bigger a hero that you need to be. Like that, because I mean, the man's literally. Most people would consider where he was the dream. He's sitting there chowing down on all this magnificent food at this feast, and then he has some buxom wench trying to sit in his lap. Like most men would be like, oh fuck yeah, but the problem is the moral of the story in there is none of that was his to take, even though it was being offered to him. And that falls into the Kelpie story that we just done as well. Like the Kelpie itself could be a warning as temptation. It's a case of that's not your horse, don't steal the fucking horse. Yes. Or it's a case of you're a married woman, why are you out next to some loch chatting up to this really handsome man who strangely smells like the sea.
They're all warnings, right? Like I remember in that video I watched it, and you said, did they really exist? And it's like, well, hang on, don't they exist? Because right? That's our materialist mindset. That's our materialist mindset. Back in the day, when you go back, their ontology, their worldview was different to us. They weren't materialists. They didn't see that way, but they literally saw, maybe not back, it depends how far that legend goes back. I think it probably goes far back a long way. They literally saw it though. Even if it wasn't materially there, as you say, they saw it. Like they didn't just tell a BS story about it. It was like in their, so in their worldview that they would see. Like there's records of this stuff. Like there's records of it, even today in like extreme moments. Like there's like two people see the same thing. Like there's these two rock climbers that they almost died, and they both saw the same thing, the same like mythological thing appear. In like this is in 1920 or something. Jung talks about this. So that's just an interesting point. Is that it was real to them, and they would see them out there. Like you might call that an apparition. Like gods, for instance, like Zeus, they saw them in the forest when they would go out there, and not just as a delusion. Like. Not every time, of course. Sorry, go.
Slightly modern one. Those two people that I know, one of them I'm quite close with, and we were talking about things like this, myths and legends, blah, blah, blah. And he told me a story about when he was 5 years old, he was out in the back garden with his sister, and it was sort of dusk, like sun's not quite set yet. It's still semi-light, but it's a little bit dark. And they looked up and they saw a black figure with glowing red eyes sitting on the roof, but they said it was a man, but it was crawling on all fours, and it started shrieking at us in like some language. But then when we were shouting things back at it, like in fear, like shouting, go away and stuff like that at it, the thing started speaking in English to them, and it was saying horrific, like vulgar, like horrible shit. But he turned around and says, when he said it, it didn't sound like just some old man saying horrible shit. Like it sounded archaic the way the way this thing was wording it. And we spoke about the story, and I was just sitting there going, oh fucking hell, that's quite scary, a scary thing for a child to go through. He decided to go home that night and call his sister. Like this, the guy's in his 50s now, and he called his sister and went, do you remember when we were in the back garden playing like years ago, when I was like 6 and you were like 8, and that thing was on the roof? And his sister went apeshit and went, I thought I made that up. I didn't think that was a real memory. You remember that as well? And he went, yeah, I remember it. I thought I made it up. But both of them remembered it, and they were both like vouching each other's parts of the story. And that, I don't know, I found that really weird. Look, that freaked me out a little.
People need to understand though that, look, like we've got this mindset, we know everything because of science. We know, this atheism. I'm not an atheist personally, but possession, right? And in an objective language, possession's real. When you're possessed by the devil, that's a literal meme complex. And like if you want to talk in objective language, that's an archetype that has possessed them, and they're no longer sort of conscious. It's taken over consciousness, right? It's not just, they're not just going, no, they're possessed by it. if you wanted to, like the meme complex, because like I mentioned before, like what we are as characters is procedures and an outcome. Like stories are alive, like they change, exist. They're sort of like, they exist in a sort of hyperspace between all of us, in the sense of they're in each of our brains, right? But that region is real. Like they're real arrangements of real matter in your brain. They just happen to be across many brains, right? But that's what a god is. And again, like I said, possession is real in that sense. Like they're not making.
So would you say that? So would you say that something happened to them to cause a massive enough shift in their personality to push them into negative traits? So negative traits, like I'm not saying lying on the ground, writhing, speaking in tongues, trying to summon Beelzebub himself. I don't mean like literal shit like that. I mean like, do you feel that something happened to them in the process, turned them into a worse off person that then does bad things?
I think that our psyche, and this is like, this is psychology, think about Jung, whatever, is that you're not just your immanence, your consciousness. There are things below the surface that are operating that you're just unconscious of, right? Yeah. Think about your sex drive. You can't control that, can you? So you go, I'm not going to jerk off tomorrow, for instance. I'm not going to do this tomorrow. And then you end up doing it, don't you? Or I'm going to be on a diet. So how much control do you really have? There are archetypes below the surface, which will, if you don't integrate them, right? Like say having a partner, having a relationship, that's integrating your anima, which is like the female part of your personality. That, let's say a possessed individual, you said, I would say what happens to that person is, yes, something happens to them. Something happens to them, or some habit or whatever's going through them that's allowed the conditions for this archetype to possess them. That's under the surface. So whatever, they get raped or whatever, I don't know what happens as a prelude to, but they have the meme complex that's in them, let's say. Like a meme complex is like a gene is. A gene, you know what a gene is? It's a big connection of code. It means the same sort of thing. That's sort of alive. The meme is alive as a meme complex, and that complex possesses them. And it's not like they're probably not conscious, these sort of meme complexes, but they have agency. Like
they have a
German
goal
word
in
for
mind.
and like think about Hitler, right? That was a whole nation possessed by like Odin, the god Woden, the god of like it's you can just see in everything in their behavior. Like it's as Christianity died, like he was possessed. He wasn't an individual. Like he was possessed by this thing, this Woden force. Like in all their behavior matched on to that god and what it's and it's and you look in the mythology, it's like that. But does that make sense?
What was the term that was used recently to describe all the stuff that was happening with the coronavirus? Is it mass formation psychosis, I believe was the term, where basically, loads and loads of people had sort of delusion. In some cases, it's used as a delusion. For example, everyone done it with coronavirus, where everyone was like fucking assaulting people for not wearing masks and screaming at people and calling them filthy plague rats for not being vaccinated and all that type of stuff. And it could be something along those lines, because mass formation psychosis was described in places like Nazi Germany, communist China, where a higher power, in some cases the government, maybe the power that, maybe it came from higher than them, but the government was the impetus that spread it into everybody else. That they were the actors on the earthly plane that spread it into the rest of the population, and of course everyone else that didn't bend the knee was exterminated, or othered at the very least.
But dude, you've really grabbed onto something there, and there's a lot of people talking about this in the cognition space, in this sort of the meaning space on YouTube, and they're calling it an egregore, which is like an old like Christian word for like a sort of like a demon, right? And this psychosis you're talking about, that's the woke thing. What do you think the woke thing is, right? It's an egregore, and it's using the internet, and it's got these update loops. So you've seen that meme that's like, oh, I believe in the current thing, and that's Ukraine, right? It was this, and they're all sort of possessed by that egregore. But the woke thing, right? See, a protester comes to you.
Sorry, it's just this here. You were saying it was a demon, right? And this is, I don't know, my mind just went to this because, see, one of the main things, and I believe this truly, one of the main reasons behind the woke thing is pride, like in themselves, the ego. This super egotistical type thing. So for example, like, see how the problems that they preach about, they don't actually want them solved. They don't care whether or not they're solved. In fact, I don't think they want them solved, because that goes against their best interest to say, oh, I am so against, guys, did you know that racism's bad? Like and subscribe to my channel and everything. Aren't I such a good person? And it's a case of a lot of these people don't actually care about fighting racism. They want the pride of being able to say, I'm such a good person, praise me, feed my ego, feed my virtue. That's what it seems like. And it's a case of, when you said a demon, I went, that is kind of how a demon acts.
Dude, it is. That's literally Luciferianism. It's about like Lucifer. Like, you don't have to think about Christianity in the sense. Like, Luciferianism, and the way it's described it's the self-worship, self-crowning.
Yes,
it's all about that. It's about my subjective experience is all that matters. You call me what I force you to call me. Be it a man.
Yes.
You see, it's Lucifer. Like, it's like, no, I won't worship any hierarchy, any values, any mythology. I'm just going to worship myself in this. It's anything immediate, right? Like, and you think about it, when you go, like, these protesters, when you speak to them, like, who do you think you're speaking to? You're not speaking to an individual. You're speaking to it, the Geist, the Egregore. Think about it, right?
That's fucking scary, man.
No, but listen, because all the answers, are they the answers of an individual, or is it the ideology? That's the answer, right? They don't answer you as an individual, do they? They say what exactly, right? It's an egregore. It's literally like a demon, and it updates itself. And now it's using the internet to. I know people might be watching this thinking that sounds crazy, but just look into some people that are talking about this on YouTube, like egregores and geists. Like, they're real. Like, it's a thing. I don't know if it's conscious. Who knows if the egregore's conscious? But it definitely has agency. Well, it updates itself. It updates itself based on how we try to kill it. It changes and adapts.
Like a virus.
Yes.
but the thing as well is like, it does, see how they say that demons, especially like crossroad demons, they feed into your desires. And usually whenever a wish is made, there is a catch. There's a little monkey's paw in there as well. Maybe when they say, oh, I wish for mountains of gold, he'll summon that mountain right on top of you. Or at the end of it, he gets your soul, and it is a bargain. But because we live in like you said, we live in the information age where everyone's all Instagram, and lots of people base their self-worth on how many likes they get. Everybody wants to shape the way the world sees them. Everybody wants to say, I want everyone to think that I'm good and I'm awesome and I'm cool. And picture how the way you felt like that at school. Everybody had a little bit of feeling like that at school, right? But school was a couple hundred people. We now have access to the internet with hundreds of millions of people. And you're just one person in an ocean of all of that. So the competition to get higher up to the top just got a hell of a lot more fierce, and that requires a hell of a lot more basically moral ambiguity when it comes to achieving your end goal. So it would be a case of, if I was a demon, I would feed on that. Oh, yes. You want everyone to think you're a cool and good person. I can help arrange that.
Yeah. And it's like, and what will I offer to do that? It's the easiest thing. It's like, what's the most outrageous thing I can say?
The life behind your fucking eyes. Because if you ever, one thing as well, right? Have you seen the video? What you just said? You're not talking to a person. You're talking. Was it Egregore?
Egregore.
Right.
Yeah. Like gore, as in.
Oh, Egregore. Right. Have you seen? I call her the abortion demon, and it's funnily enough, even though we're talking about this, before this, I called her the abortion demon, the one that says, I am what conservatives fear, as she's like pouring the glass of wine, saying that she's getting an abortion. Like, someone commented under it going, why does this person not feel like a human? And I watched the video and I went, there's something not right with this fucking person. This is strange.
Well, it's like you just said, the desire of her, it's just pure, it's possessed her based on her desire for the clout. So the desire for clout goes away, because does she really believe that? Whatever, it doesn't matter. She's now possessed by the thing, because it's got her in the sense that she's saying the thing that's most outrageous. She's doing what the egregore would most want, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like a feedback loop, a reward feedback loop. So the egregore wants it, and it gets what it wants. She gets clout. right, from the rest of the people that are possessed by it. It's an alternate hierarchy, right? Think about it. It is an alternate hierarchy. Woke people, right? They've invented a way of making money that isn't about merit. It's, if I say the right things, I can climb the activist hierarchy and get reward and get paid just for this. And that's just degenerate. That doesn't create wealth. All it does is degenerate wealth in the sense that it degenerates it from the wider society, right? Because it's inefficient to do all this stuff because it's not based on merit, or you know what I mean? So I know that like, but it's more nefarious than it sounds, because that is the egregore. Right?
And well, the way that you're describing it as well, I don't know, are you familiar with Warhammer?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, but that's not like...
I know, but it's just the way it's getting described. Say, for example, Khorne, he's the blood god, right? The blood of like chaos and war. Now, the way he does things is he doesn't care who's winning. He doesn't care what side is going to come out on top. All he cares about is that war is happening. That's what he wants. And basically, if everyone's at peace and everyone's at war, then that does not give Khorne power, and that makes him very upset. So what he might do is come in and he'll find some weak minds to corrupt, to instigate each other into causing a war, right? So basically, it's a case of, you've heard the phrase, blood for the blood god, right? So, and if he's not getting any, then he will and basically instigate situations to cause blood to be spilled, right? He's not allowed to do it himself, but he can certainly whisper a few thoughts into people's ears. That guy just called your mum a bitch.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing.
Totally.
It feels like that, yeah.
But dude, like, you're not wrong. Like, think about Tzeentch, the change god, and Slaanesh, who is the pleasure god, right? He's just feeding on what you want. And you look at the shape-shifting changing of the male and female transgender stuff, if we can talk about that, whatever. Anyway, think about that, like Tzeentch. But Tzeentch, right? Like, it's hedonism. Like, that's what we're facing. And it's like, it's feeding off it. Think about Pornhub, for instance. That's almost like it, like at least a base level, algorithmic, like, if that's automating content, starts automating content and cutting stuff together on its own, it just uses what you like, and it's slowly becoming more like enslaving people to their like base desires. Pornhub, right? Because by more and more novel. And if the algorithm starts to do it, what is that? Does that have agency?
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, algorithms, they don't even have a soul. They're lines of code. Yeah. They're just, but the problem is that they're learning about you, and they're trying to find out what you want to keep you glued to your screen as much as possible. And that's not just Pornhub, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. They all do it. They go, okay, this is the type of stuff that this person engages with the most. This is the stuff that we're going to stick in front of them. And before you know it, you've literally sat there for 3 hours browsing on your phone other people that are doing a bunch of shit to try and get clout. I mean, the only time I would say that that's time well spent is if you're watching a good movie, or you're watching like a documentary because you want to learn about something. Then okay, that's fine. But it's a case of, what do you mean you just stared at tits for the last 3 hours? what do you mean? Like, what did that achieve? Like, what knowledge did you gain? Like, from that?
Totally. Yeah. Like, where's the virtue? Like, how have you bettered yourself in any way? And that's what people are lacking. They're thirsting for meaning, which is, again, what I think is the use at looking at mythology, right? Because what is that but a positive egregore, right? That's how, if you want to insulate yourself from these things, like, that might be for a lot of people, that's Christians, right? They have Jesus is a positive egregore that protects them, let's say. Yeah. And mythology is the same. It could be like a positive, like there's something like in the English culture, I call it like the spirit of the King of England, right? The King spirit, which is the value hierarchy. It's what we most value the most, the patterns of action of our greatest heroes. Now, you could consider that Scottish for your own, whatever that is. That makes up a cultural personality that forms civilization. That is that's a personality. Because what is a personality but a pattern of behavior from these, like, think about it. These things are kind of created. Mythology, Celtic mythology, it comes out of the oral tradition, right? That is the people as a whole all tell the stories in pubs. When they go out into the world, they have that story in their head, and they implicitly imitate the procedures in the story of the hero when they face a situation that's similar. Say Robin Hood, for instance, right?
Yeah.
If that's successful, right? Because it reflects the reality on the ground as the ethic of the people. If it's successful, they live or they have a competitive advantage. They get back to the pub, and they retell the story, right? If it's slightly not successful, they adapt creatively in the environment and slightly change that story when they get back to the pub with their version of it. That's how the oral tradition emerges to create this sort of... Do you know what I mean? It's like so all these people going out into the world, using the story they've learned about Robin Hood as a great hero, or William Wallace, for instance, right? They go from the oral tradition or a Celtic one, they go out into the world, they implicitly imitate those heroic procedures because that's someone you admire, right? A hero you admire, you can't help it. It's the value hierarchy. You go out into the world and do it. If it works, that's natural selection, just like creatures are selected. If it slightly doesn't work, because we're human, we adapt slightly to the situation and slightly change that, right? That's like a Bayesian feedback loop. That all these people come back to the pub with their new information of this story, right? And when they retell the story, all the different people, it's slightly changed. So it reflects the truth on the ground. So those procedures of those great heroes are real truths on the ground that worked for the people. Yeah. That's why they survived.
It just altered over time, almost a little bit like Chinese whispers, but in this case, instead of okay, it's not the original story, but it's now more correct information.
Yes.
Essentially, yeah.
Moral truth, though, like it works. It helps you, right? And that's essentially, that could be Celtic heroes or whatever. That's a positive egregore. So if you tell more of your Celtic mythology, and I really think you should, from this perspective, because it's fucking important. It's great. When I saw you doing that, I went, yes, this is great. This is going to be so good. More of that, because the ethics in the stories, and when you break them down and analyze them, which is what I do for English, on the English side of it, you can break out the procedural information, the procedure and its outcome from the heroes, and that shit's real. That shit works in the world when you imitate it. Like, say when you watch a movie, a woke movie, that's dangerous, right? You know why? Because the procedures that are in their movies don't match the value hierarchy that's in the psyche. Those procedures don't reflect the truth on the ground. So say it's a feminist movie, right? And it says you're a woman and you can beat up any man. What happens in the world when you imitate that? And you see people doing that these days. Like, it's not untrivial, is it? A woman goes and punches this man and gets completely knocked out. Like, what the hell are you doing? You know, I mean,
I know what you mean. Yeah, I've seen it. Oh, look at this little bad bitch. She weighs 120 pounds and she takes down like 3 250-pound bodybuilders. And it's like, okay, I will admit, like, technique can sometimes trump size. Not when you're 120 pounds.
Exactly.
Not when you're fighting some like great big bulldog that doesn't even have a neck. Right? It's like, no. But I completely get it.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that's true though. Like, and it can be much worse than that, can't it? With the type of stuff you see in it. It presenting you a false reality. That's what a lie is. And you imitate it in the world and it doesn't work. Okay, here's one. See what you think of this. I'm a woman. I'll be satisfied with just a career and not having children. Then you get to 50 years old and then you can't have kids anymore because you were presented these narratives that told you you'd be fulfilled. And then, as we see with stuff that comes out now, you're not fulfilled, are you? And you can't do anything about it.
There are a lot of women in 50s, 60s, 70s. Oh, I wanted a career, or I wanted to be the cool auntie that sipped on Tia Maria's, living in the city in my single bedroom apartment with my 3 cats. Like, they wanted to be that, like, you see, being a socialite, that can only last for so long. Like, it gets to a point when you're approaching your 40s and everyone's like, why are you still hanging out in trendy bars with a bunch of 20-year-olds? Like, what the fuck are you doing? Right. And there's so many women now who are in their 50s, 60s and so on, who are alone. They no family, no kids. Like, maybe they've got brothers and sisters and they've got some nieces and nephews and stuff like that. But outside of that's it. They don't have anyone. There's no husband, there's no kids, there's no grandkids, there's nothing like that. And they've passed the point now where it's too late. And there's so many women. Like, there was an article from like a famous woman who divorced her husband when she was like 27 and lived the life of the socialite and everything. And now she's in her 50s and she's wrote this huge article saying it was the biggest mistake she ever made, because she says, I've never felt so alone. Because it gets to a point where, like, and as some people can go like, haha, serves you right. But nah, that's a truly like tragic way to be, and
I know.
It's a horrible way to be.
I laughed earlier, and then I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking that exact same thing, and I'm just thinking, I love women. I love women. I love women. I don't want this to happen to them.
Yeah. It's like one of the things as well that someone pointed out, and I think this is brilliant because this is what I would like, is whenever someone's on their deathbed or whenever someone's having their eulogy read out and stuff like that, no one ever turns around and goes, "Oh, and we should all remember Mary's great career. She really crunched those numbers. She worked her way up to middle management and stuff like that, to the fucking funeral of about like 3 people. One of them's the hearse driver." Man, like nobody wants that. Like the way that I want to be sent out is the way I assume any other women should be sent out. Having about 15 people standing around my bed, like brothers, sisters, daughters, sons, grandsons, granddaughters, fucking everybody, their husbands, their wives, and everything like that. Like that's a send off. That's a send off. Like listen, look at these 15 different stories you helped create that are going to go off into the world and forge the world. Like they're going to have a ripple effect that will continue through the aeons. Like, I'm sorry, your job at the accounting firm didn't do that.
No.
Right, it did not. Right.
And like your father and your mother are literally in you. Like the spirit of them is in you. Like, I know this sounds bit. That's why it's so important, because you live through them, and then you're the spirit of your ancestors. This is what Jung said, Carl Jung, the psychologist. I'm sure you probably is that the spirit, like when you're young, they're disorganized, like spirit. When I say spirit, right, that sounds a bit spiritual, but let's just think about meme complex, right?
Yeah.
They're in there disorganized, right? And he invented a practice called like an imaginal practice, right? It's called active imagination, where he would, it's like meditation, right? But you're basically deeply meditating and then communicating with this stuff that's in the psyche, just in the unconscious. It's like archetypal stuff, right? It's active imagination, right? And the spirit of your father's in there. Think about it practically or pragmatically. Is that when with your kid, maybe you haven't done this yet, but you probably find yourself saying stuff your dad said to you, to your son or daughter. You know what I mean? Because the spirit of him, the procedures are in him. Like you have even if it's not exactly him, you have a construction of his character in your memory and mind, which represents his.
There are little things that I've mimicked. One of them's a stupid little thing, and it sounds kind of silly to talk about, right? But I do this thing with Sadie, just like my dad does, where I'll be sitting holding her and I'll be dancing with her, and I'll do this. It feels embarrassing doing it, right? This is some private stuff, right? But I'll go like that and like dance with her, right? Silly little stupid thing, right? But she likes it. But like that's what my dad did with me. That's whenever my dad picks up a baby, that's what he does. And everybody does that little like dance with the baby and makes that little noise. And I do that. I do that with Sadie now and everyone as well. And it's because I've seen him doing it. And
exactly
as well.
Right. And literally in the childhood development stage, like this is like Piaget. I know this is sounding a bit Peterson talking about this, but like literally you absorb your parent in that stage, because you're completely imitating everything they do. You don't listen to their words, like you imitate them just based on everything you're seeing. It's different than forming a representation going, I'm going to copy that person. You literally absorb them, and you kind of absorb their character. That's how you kind of get the value hierarchy.
Because of the mimicry stage, children, it's a survival thing as well, where children are, basically it's hard-coded into the brain, where even though you don't understand the action, you mimic it. And apparently it's through repeatedly mimicking the action you would discover, like, it could be something, like go back to, like, let's return to Monkey, like all the way back then and everything. Like you'll see like one of the apes like peeling an orange or peeling a bit of fruit. The child might pick up a rock and try and do it and everything. And even though that's not going to work, it's the child mimicking it. So, but when the child picks up that bit of fruit, it will be able to copy it because it mimicked the behavior. So it came part of a survival thing, but it seems that even though we've sort of lost the need for that, it still serves an important purpose, but hopefully you're only getting the positive traits to pass on.
Well, no, you can't get the negative ones, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
like it's but it's everything. Like it's not trivial though. That's not trivial. Like, and especially when it comes to the human, like you're picking up everything, the intonation. And that doesn't mean just physical things. Like when you combine all those things together, like you're absorbing like the value hierarchy, like of your culture as well. Like there's a reason why you like stuff. There's a reason why you like Celtic mythology. There's a reason why you like I don't like. There's a reason why you don't like it. Like, you probably prefer that mythology over, not just because that's where you're from. It's because it's connected to your value hierarchy, which is in there, like underlies everything, right?
I've got a few statues of the gods up there as well.
Oh yeah,
Stuff like that as well. Yeah, I've got a few. I've mainly got the Morrigan.
When
When
was your first interest in that sort of stuff? Like, in terms of the cultural, Celtic, Gaelic?
A long time ago, because there are a lot of stories. It's mostly for your grandparents that you hear stuff like that as well. Like, you hear like lots of little silly like wives' tales and all that. But then there's some where you understand that they're supernatural. Like, say for example, the Kelpies, horses that could walk on water and all that. Okay, you understand that's supernatural. But then there was one story that I was reading, and my mind got kind of blown by that, because this is considered mythical, right? And it's called the Gilly-Doo. The Gilly, or it might be the Gilly-Doo, depending on which island you're on, right? But the Gilly-Doo, and it's named after the ghillie suit. See the ghillie suit that snipers wear,
right?
Yeah,
okay.
the ghillie suit, right? But the Gilly-Doo was basically a man who lived in the forest, and he had those clothes made of leaves and all that. And what happened is, sometimes kids would, apparently there was a famous forest up north, I forget the exact names, but I'm going to do a video on him eventually. But sometimes kids would go to the forest next to the loch where they were playing, and the kids would get lost in the forest, and it would start to get dark, and they were getting scared. And what would happen is the Gilly-Doo would appear, and he would say, "It's far too dangerous for you to be out here at night. Come with me to my house, to my cabin." I know sometimes, oh God, is this story going to turn sinister or something? No, the Gilly-Doo would take them at the wood, take them in the cabin. He would feed them. He would tell them stories, and then the next morning when the sun came up, the Gilly-Doo would lead them to the edge of the forest and like point, "Oh, there's your village. There you go. You're safe now." And then I was reflecting on that story, and I was going, why was that mythical? That was just a hermit that lived in the woods. Absolutely nothing supernatural happened whatsoever. See if it was like, oh, he spoke to the trees and they moved out the way, and he could control the animals, or he could float. So then I'd be like, okay, then this is a mythical being. But then a part of me went, this was just a nice hermit that lived in the woods, right? And he obviously had some like clothes covered in moss or like what have you and stuff like that. But again, it still served as an important story of like, basically it was a guy doing a good deed.
Yeah, dude, but that's really interesting that you say that, right? Because when they are mythical, that's a clue. Like, the mythical stuff is truer than the historical stuff, right? Because it's passed through more people. It's like, think about that. Like in Scotland, it's like the borderlands culture. It's the same as Northern English culture in many ways, right? When you're on the borderland, what would be the adaptive benefit of that story passing around? Is that perhaps, like, if you're caught on the roads, right, and the borderland, maybe it's better to hide in the forest, you know? Like, maybe that helped, like, because other places, like, you get killed by a wolf, but we killed all the wolves here. Like, we killed all the wolves in 1200. So they're not, you don't get killed by bears or anything. I know that might, perhaps the forest is dangerous, but, well, the guy who's dressed in the way he is, he lives there. Perhaps there was an adaptive benefit to that story, that the reason it survived. That makes sense to me, though. Like Borderlands, Borderlands, maybe like English soldiers or whatever, or Scottish soldiers attacking the English. So it's better to be in the forest, right? Go with a man who looks like he's from the place, not the outsiders in the red coat, whatever.
Yeah,
right? You know what I mean?
Well, there was other things as well. Apparently, like, whenever like a bush was moving, like, parents would go, "Oh, look, it's a Gilly-Doo," and stuff like that as well. And that there was another sort of well, I'm just saying my parents pointing it out. Have you ever heard of a tanuki? Is it that we're going all the way across the world now to Japan? And what would happen is tanukis were raccoons. They were Japanese raccoons that were seen as extremely mischievous little creatures, right? They weren't sinister, but they wouldn't like kill you or hurt you or anything like that. But they would play either a prank on you that would like either be a minor inconvenience or would completely ruin your fucking day, right? And they could shapeshift into all manner of different objects, right? So say, for example, if you sat in a chair and suddenly it broke and you fell, people would go, "Fucking tanuki transformed my chair," and everyone. But he also says if a tanuki turned into a person, they would have big black bags under their eyes. And this is Japan, where people work like 70, 80-hour weeks. So you get a lot of people walking around with big black bags under their eyes, and mums and dads would go, "Look, it's a tanuki." And kids would be like, "Oh, it's a tanuki."
Dude, that's not wrong though, right? Because say you work really long hours, that your conscious mind becomes weaker, and the archetypal automatic, they're autonomous, right? They come up and start and sort of possess you for a limited time in a way. Think about it. When you're really tired, like your sex drive drives you way more. Like you can't control yourself as much, right? So there's probably a reason why that occurred. You know,
Japan are also going through major stuff right now to completely revamp their work ethic, because like they've realized the destruction it's causing to society. Because basically, the way Japanese culture still has the thing of what basically the way things were way back when, where you had kids, you took care of the kids, you raised the kids. Then once you reached a certain age where, you know, your bones were starting to get a little bit creaky and you can't really do it on your own anymore, the property and everything passes on to the children, and then they look after you. And you would also help raising like their children and stuff like that. So basically, children are an investment as well in your own future, so that there are people to take care of you when you get old, right? But the problem is, in Japan, people are not having children because these insane work hours. In the case of the woman can't stay home all the time, the man both of them have to work, right? In this case, we don't have time to raise these kids. But then what's happening is, because people are working 80-hour fucking weeks, the work environment is so fucking over competitive that school students are being put under a massive amounts of pressure, where if you get anything less than a 99 on a test, you're a complete failure. Right? And it's like, and that's why suicide rates are so high. Like, the competitiveness has gone so mental that people are going, I can't fucking cope with this. And they're killing themselves. And also the fact is, no one's having fucking children anymore in Japan. So basically, they now have more old people than they have young people. So they have an aging population and not enough people to take care of them.
Yeah. Also, they've got intergenerational loans. Did you know that? Like,
what?
Yeah, a lot of these, because housing's so expensive in Japan, that they borrow as father, son, and then that loan passes when the father dies to the next person. So isn't that
holy
fucked up?
Shit?
Like,
that is fucked.
Our understanding and our way of life, especially because we were able to leave and lots of Scots went to America and such. It's like the kid buys a house, right? You're able to have your own place and not, you know, that's part of the American dream. Whatever American, it's all of us really in the Anglosphere.
Yeah.
To not have that, I don't like that. I don't know what that would be like. Imagine that. I'm still paying this off. You don't live to pay off your house. Like, you're in debt, and it just continues over, like, far out. Terrible. But
I will admit, financially things are getting a bit atrocious just now. Like, I think obviously you're very, very staunch capitalist. I feel that private property is something that is extremely important, because I think one of the things that can feed into a sense of belonging and being part of the world is having something that's yours. This is yours. You worked hard, you got this, you earned this, it's yours. But instead of having the whole, oh shit, I've got this for the next 25 years, and if I even miss 1 month, the bank will come and take it away. Like that type of thing. Terrible. And it's also, that's why everyone's freaking out about the Great Reset, where nobody will own anything. Well, the government will own it all. Yeah. So the government's the owner. It now has a complete monopoly over who gets what. Right? It's like Uber communism.
Well, think about, because then if they can do that, they can just adjust the prices and such. You know, if you're just everyone's just a slave class, it's a serf class.
It is a complete serf class, and it's also a case of, as well as, you know, if you don't toe the line and maybe say some things that aren't particularly nice. Oh dear, looks like you only get half a bag of rice this week, young man. Yeah. Next week, come back with different opinions.
Yeah. And it's like they're trying to remove back in the day when you probably don't like lords very much, but the cool thing about this is what you kind of are now, is that you're an independent lord, like gentleman, like independent lord, right? In the sense that, like, Tim Pool is the modern version of an independent rural lord. You don't live in a village, you own your house. Yeah, that's what I mean, right? Yeah. But they're populist. It's populist, right? But what that does is, because you own your own thing, your income comes from that's the holiness and of small business as well. I know that sounds lame, but we call something business, but really what that is aspiring, like you're talking about private property. You're aspiring to the values of the king, in a way. The values of you wanting an independent space that earns all your income, right? This is a really important part of our values. It's your farm. It provides all your money. This is you. Your channel is a populist farm. I don't want to call it farm because the viewers and the audience they consider you their friend, because that's true, right? Because when you watch someone on YouTube, they are. But anyway, point is, you're an independent, rural lord in a way, but not in a way that you lord over anyone, but in the sense that you don't have to obey what the ruling elite say, at least to a large degree. You're independent from it. And a lot of the great inventions, even the Scots, like all the great inventions of the industrial age, like Lord Kelvin, all these independent scientists, they were quacks and weirdos. They were like fucking spiritualists, right? Because they were independent, they could do interesting stuff. And that's essentially what you are. You are, Tim Pool is,
They're just de facto leaders. Hop talks about little things like that, where he turns around and says, if there is any type of like aristocracy or anyone that's held higher in the hierarchy within the community, it should be someone that the people choose, right? It shouldn't be a case of like, oh, by right of birth, this guy's the king now. It's a case of people were kind of like, well, I don't think Stabby McStabberson the third should be in charge of us. Like, I mean, he's killed like 18 servants this month and all that. Can we not have Kind David be in charge? Like he seems to give more of a fuck about us and all that. And that's the thing. It all comes down to choice. The important part of it is choice of who do you want to be your lord and your king and everything. Like, is that if that's the way that you want to live, then you can go and live that way. But that's Hoppianism, and that's too much to get into at this late hour.
Oh yeah, no worries. We're probably at that point where we should finish up anyway. I'll let you get to bed, man, because you've got. But this was really good, dude. I enjoy the conversation.
I enjoyed it, man. Yeah, no, it was good fun. There's certainly interesting stuff about the Egregore. I didn't think of it that way, but that's a little bit of a terrifying concept.
Dude, check it out. And I would say anyone at home, look, there's people talking about this. Like, I don't know if you know about John Vervaeke, but these are like cognitive scientists. But people are connected to them. He's not. Well, they have sort of talked about geist spirits or whatnot as agencies, that are involved. So yeah, I would look at it. And just. If you search on YouTube Egregore, you can probably find some stuff. You should as well, Mark.
Right.
Just have a look at what's going on. But anyway, man, it was a real pleasure. I look forward to talking again soon, man.